Defiance tries some ambitious stuff. It's tied into a new TV show, and it's one of the very few MMOs to ever go multi-platform.
You saved my ass when you didn't have to.
The thing is, it isn't a very good game to begin with, and both of those attempts at doing something new end up working against it on the PC. Sure, some parts, like the competitive multiplayer and story missions, are generally decent fun, but most of the time you're doing the mind-numbingly repetitive quests and killing the bad AI enemies, and that can be flat out boring.
We need to take down some targets.
Don't move. Now drop the core. Don't do it. You will die. I promise.
Graphically, Defiance is just okay. It runs smoothly and looks crisp, but it isn't exactly keeping up with other recent MMOs like Guild Wars 2. The cross-platform design really takes a toll on the mouse and keyboard controls too. The interface was very clearly designed to be used with a gamepad, because many of the menus just feel utterly unintuitive without one. Even quitting out is a hassle, which is pretty ridiculous. Plugging in a controller is the only way to fix most of the frustration. But let's talk about the story, because it ends up being one of the better parts of the game. If you haven't watched the Syfy TV show about a post-alien invasion Earth, you should try to before you play, because the game does a pretty bad job of introducing you to the overall backstory of the Defiance universe. But once I got into it, it wasn't bad at all. Granted, it had painfully bad dialogue, and the voice acting isn't always the greatest.
We've been hiding in here for days without food or water.
But it is nice that it is voiced, instead of making us read blocks of text. Cutscenes do a good job of giving us context for missions, and there are a couple of likable, if completely cliched characters.
Don't get too close to the ledge with this guy. It's a long fall.
While they didn't blow me away, the story missions are where you'll find some of the best designed quests, and I like some of the implications it makes about the Defiance universe. Specifically, that some of what we're told about the history of the human-alien conflict might not be entirely true.
I only want what's best for the Bay.
Let's get in and just put a small opening in the crystal. Aim for that spot.
Defiance plays first and foremost like a traditional third-person shooter. It's competent action, so long as the occasional lag spikes aren't getting in the way. But combat immediately starts to get dull because abilities are limited, and the various mutant, monster, or bandit enemies are so stupid they can barely put up a fight. The only time the basic enemies are remotely challenging is when a horde of them come at you at once. The only reason it never gets super easy is because, unlike most other MMOs, Defiance doesn't make your character dramatically more powerful as you level up. It does allow you to equip better gear, but the same enemies you fight early on will still be potentially deadly tens of hours in. The leveling system is a double-edged sword, because while it does allow you to play with friends without having to worry about a disparity in levels, it robs you of a sense of progress.
You're grossly underpaid!
I haven't been talking about the character classes you can play in Defiance, because there aren't any. Whichever backstory you pick for your character, it's mostly a cosmetic choice. What distinguishes your avatar is the path you take on the skill tree, where you can unlock and equip perks to boost stats like reload speed, or make you do more damage when your shields fail. Every character can equip every weapon type, and you can respec so easily that you can use all the various powers and perks eventually. Weapons change up how you play a bit, since you can equip everything from sniper rifles to shotguns to beam weapons, but it doesn't change gameplay significantly, as, say, additional active powers would. There's definitely no reason to ever make a second character, and that's kind of a good thing, because I'm not really motivated to go through some of these truly boring missions again. Many story missions and side quests break down to the grossest sort of fetch quests.
I've got a job that's catered for you.
Sometimes you might have to disable 3 generators, another time it might involve you investigating a few sites for clues, but it always boils down to holding down a button until the game says you've earned experience. It's the exact kind of thing that people make fun of MMOs for.
I'm not easily impressed, but I'll fess up to it on this one.
There's also a series of races and glorified shooting galleries, but none of them are more than distractions. They're not all bad, of course. The cooperative dungeons are generally pretty good, with some cleverly designed bosses. Likewise, the competitive multiplayer is actually some good fun, as long as you're up against players who are at a comparable level. Shooting at thinking players in deathmatches, or the larger capture point-based Shadow War battles, give Defiance hope for long-term life after you hit the level cap.
Bleeding all over the place.
One hitch though, it often takes a long time to find a Shadow War match to play in. Outside of multiplayer and dungeons though, Defiance doesn't have much to encourage us to be social. There's no central town, there's no crafting systems of any kind, and there's no auction house. You can't share quests with friends, so doing things together is tougher than it should be. I know this is supposed to be a post-apocalyptic sort of world, but Defiance often feels disappointingly lonely. Fortunately, if you want, you can just play through the story like it's a single-player game. Dynamically spawning public missions, such as the grandiose Arcballs, help to get players working together, but they're generally so swarmed by players that I never felt like I was in any danger. I was more like a cog in an experience grinding machine. My actions didn't seem to matter, and I didn't feel connected to anyone around me. But what's really put a damper on my enjoyment of Defiance, though, is the bugs. I experienced more than one broken quest, I was dropped from queues, I had reload issues with guns, and a few times it just flat out crashed. Those are probably launch issues that'll go away soon, but for now it doesn't exactly encourage me to recommend it.
Damn it! I'm dying here!
What do you think you're doing?
Don't worry. I trust that guy about as much as I'd trust a hellbug with a baby.
Defiance certainly isn't a terrible MMO. There's a story here that ultimately works, a few likable characters, some decent multiplayer modes, and some good dungeons. It's just that for every moment where I was getting into it, there were several more where the experience grind felt like, well, a grind. The few good quests in there just aren't worth suffering through the endless tedium of fetch quests. So it's not awful, but it's hard to recommend. For more on Defiance, keep it on IGN.